It was past midnight when Corinne Hale pushed open the door to her father's private room and stopped breathing. A man she had never seen before was sitting at her father's bedside, broad-shouldered, dressed in a hospital maintenance uniform, his hands moving with quiet, practiced care as he wiped Everett Hale's face with a warm cloth, adjusted the blanket across his chest, and lifted a small spoon of broth to his lips. Corinne's first thought was not concern. It was fury. She reached for the call button and summoned security without a word. 2 guards entered within 90 seconds. The man didn't flinch. He set the spoon down slowly, as if he had all the time in the world, and turned to face her with eyes that carried no guilt, only exhaustion. Then Everett moved. After 3 days of silence, after 3 days of machines breathing for him and numbers replacing his voice, Everett Hale opened his eyes, reached out and closed his hand around the stranger's wrist. His lips parted. "Stop," he said. "That's your brother." If you've ever believed that family is more than a name on a document, stay with this one. And if stories like this are what you come here for, subscribing takes 2 seconds and means you won't miss what's coming next. Corinne Hale had not slept in 4 days. She had managed the board's emergency call from the ICU waiting room, signed 3 contracts from her father's hospital floor, and delivered a product confidence statement to their largest partner hospital while standing in a stairwell that smelled of antiseptic and recycled air. She was 35 years old, CEO of Hale Medical Technologies, and she had learned long ago that falling apart was not something her position allowed. Hale Medical Technologies supplied patient monitoring systems to over 300 hospitals across the country. It was her father's company first. Everett Hale had spent 4 decades building it from a 2-room office into a publicly traded corporation. Corinne had spent the last 8 years proving she could run it without him. The board had never fully believed her. Everett had never said out loud that he did. Her mother had died when Corinne was 7. After that, it had been just the 2 of them, her father and his company, and the particular silence that lived between a man who showed love through preparation and a daughter who kept waiting to be told she was enough. When Everett collapsed during a board dinner 3 weeks earlier, he was rushed to Mercy General, the same hospital currently piloting Hale's newest monitoring system. He had been unconscious since the end of his surgery. 3 days of machines breathing for him. 3 days of numbers replacing his voice. Corinne hadn't slept properly since the night before the collapse. That was the 4th day she was carrying. The board gave her 48 hours before they began asking about the launch timeline. She gave them answers. She always gave them answers. What she did not give anyone was the truth that she came to her father's room every night after visiting hours ended and talked to him about nothing important. Quarterly numbers, the weather, a documentary she had watched twice without remembering the ending. She talked because silence felt too much like a rehearsal for something permanent. Darius Cole had been working the night shift at Mercy General for 3 years. His official title was Biomedical Equipment Technician. The person called when a ventilator threw an error code at 2 in the morning, when an IV pump alarmed without cause, when the monitoring system in the cardiac ward went dark. He was 40 years old and good at the work in the way that meant other technicians called him first, and nurses learned his extension by heart. He had an 11-year-old daughter named Maya. She had asthma that required medication his insurance didn't fully cover, so he took extra shifts. He didn't complain about it. What Darius did not talk about was his past. He answered direct questions with short, accurate answers and left everything else alone. Every evening after his shift ended before he clocked out, he took the east stairwell to the 6th floor and walked quietly to room 612. He would check the blanket, adjust the pillow, clean the IV site with a care that went beyond professional habit. Sometimes he read aloud from an old paperback, history, mostly the kind with cracked spines and penciled margins. Sometimes he just sat. Maya came with him on the nights her school schedule allowed. She would settle into the corner chair with her sketchbook and occasionally hold a one-sided conversation with the man in the bed. When a night nurse once asked her if it didn't bother her sitting with someone who couldn't respond, Maya looked up with an expression that suggested the question had missed something obvious. "He can hear," she said. Dad says sick people always hear you. Nobody at the hospital knew that Darius had met Everett Hale long before the man became a patient. Corinne arrived at room 612 at 12:40 in the morning. A monitoring alert had pulled her back to the building, and she had taken the long route past her father's room out of a habit she hadn't named yet. She saw the light under the door. She pushed it open. She watched the man in the maintenance uniform for approximately 4 seconds before she pressed the call button. Security arrived. The man turned from the bedside without urgency, held his hands slightly away from his sides, not in surrender, just the deliberate stillness of someone who had learned that sudden movements cost more than they were worth. Corinne looked at him carefully. Around his neck on a short leather cord hung an old brass key. The bow was stamped with a small H inside a circle, the original Hale Company mark used on keepsakes before the corporate rebrand 15 years ago. Her father had one like it in a box on his desk at home. "Search his bag," she said. The guard unzipped the canvas bag beside the chair. No company files, no medication bottles that didn't belong. What the bag contained: a worn paperback, a water bottle, a folded cloth, and beneath those, a small photo album with edges soft from handling. Corinne took it and opened it. A photograph she had never seen her father young, maybe 35, standing outside a small community hospital. Beside him, reaching up to hold his hand, was a black boy of about 10. The boy was squinting against sunlight. Her father was looking down at him the way she had always wanted him to look at something. She closed the album. "Who are you?" she said. Before Darius could answer, the monitor beside the bed changed pitch. Everett's hand moved, then his arm. Then his eyes opened slowly with the effort of a man returning from a great distance. His gaze found Darius with an immediacy that suggested he had known exactly where to look. "Stop," Everett said. His voice was thin and ragged, but it carried. "That's your brother." No one spoke. Corinne looked at her father, then at the man in the maintenance uniform, then at the photograph. "He's been unconscious for 3 days. He's on medication, Everett said. The word landed differently than the others. Corinne had seen that name in her father's old journals, appearing and disappearing across 2 years, never explained. She had assumed it was a business contact from the early days, someone who no longer mattered. Darius didn't move toward the bed or away from it. He looked at Everett with an expression that was not warm and not cold, and it contained something Corinne could not immediately name. "I'm here," he said quietly. Everett's eyes closed. His hand lowered back to the mattress. Darius turned to face her. "He asked me to come, 3 years ago, in person." "You're a maintenance technician in this building," she said. "Yes." "And you're claiming my father?" "I'm not claiming anything. He took me in when I was 8 years old. He was going to adopt me. That didn't happen. I haven't asked him for anything since, and I'm not asking you for anything now." He reached for his bag. The guard looked at Corinne. "Don't go anywhere," she said. By 2 in the morning, the situation had produced 2 problems that had nothing to do with each other and could not be separated. The first, Everett's attending physician told Corinne that since Darius had been asked to leave the room, her father had twice attempted to remove his IV line, and his blood pressure was climbing to dangerous levels. The simplest intervention, the doctor said carefully, was to allow the person whose presence appeared to calm him to remain present. The second, the equipment monitoring team had flagged an error pattern in the pilot system on the 3rd and 5th floors. Patient vitals were reading outside normal parameters, not wildly, but consistently enough that 2 nurses had already questioned medication dosages based on inaccurate readings. If the system couldn't be trusted, the entire pilot was in jeopardy. And if the pilot failed, the $140 million contract it was meant to secure would not survive. Darius, who had remained in the hallway without being asked twice, was the one who spoke first. "The error pattern is in the sensor module," he said. "Something in the hardware calibration was altered before installation." Corinne looked at him. "How do you know that?" "Because I installed 3 of those units myself. The drift is too consistent to be random." "You don't have access to the system data." "No," he said. "I don't." She understood what he wasn't saying. He had identified the problem from observable behavior alone, the kind of working knowledge that didn't come from a manual. She stood in the corridor with her father's doctor on one side and a failing product launch on the other, and she made a decision she did not entirely trust. "You can stay in the building. You don't go into that room alone. You don't touch any financial records or system documentation without me present. And tomorrow morning, first thing, you submit to a DNA test." Darius looked at her for a moment. "You'll get the results you're expecting. He didn't legally adopt me. There's no blood to find." "Then you have nothing to lose."
Fine.
He picked up his bag. "But understand something. You can run every test you want. What happened between your father and me isn't in the DNA. It's in 30 years of silence, and eventually you're going to have to decide whether you want to hear the rest of it." He didn't wait for her response. Corinne stood alone in the corridor, the old photograph still in her coat pocket, the alarm from her father's room finally quiet. The DNA results came back in 36 hours. No biological relationship detected. Corinne read the report twice, set it on her desk, and picked up the adoption file her father's personal attorney had located that same morning. A folder of documents that had been sitting in a storage unit in Everett's name for nearly 3 decades, labeled with nothing on the outside. The paperwork was real. A petition to adopt filed 30 years ago in the state of Georgia. Everett Hale listed as prospective parent. The child named Darius Leonard Cole, age 8. Hearing date scheduled. Outcome: petition withdrawn by petitioner 4 days before the ruling. She brought the folder to Darius in the break room on the 4th floor. He looked at it without touching it. "I know it exists," he said. "Then why didn't you lead with it?" "Because a withdrawal isn't proof of anything. It just proves he started and stopped." He poured coffee into a paper cup, offered her one. She declined. "His name is in that file," she said. "So is mine." She sat down across from him. "Tell me what happened." He looked at her for a moment as if measuring how much she actually wanted to know versus how much she thought she was supposed to ask. "My mother's name was Noreen Cole," he said. "She was an RN. She worked at a community hospital in Atlanta, where your father ran his first trial contracts early 90s when Hale was still small enough that Everett showed up in person to troubleshoot complaints." He paused. "She was good at her job. She noticed things. That was her whole personality, actually. She noticed things other people decided not to see." "What happened to her?" "She got sick. Not from the job, just sick. She didn't have anyone else, so when she couldn't care for me anymore, Everett offered to take me in temporarily. That was the word he used. Temporarily." He drank his coffee. "Except it didn't stay temporary. I was with him for almost 2 years. He hired tutors, came to my school events, taught me how to read schematics on weekends because I liked machines." He set the cup down. "Then one morning I woke up and there was a woman I'd never met sitting in the kitchen. And by that evening I was in the car with a caseworker. No explanation. None. Not then." He stood up and left the room without asking if she had more questions, which told her he wasn't performing the story for her benefit. He had simply answered what she asked, and that was the end of it. Corinne found her father's journals in the bedside cabinet, 3 small notebooks he apparently traveled with. She had assumed they were medical logs or meeting notes. She opened the oldest one that night. The name D appeared for the first time on page 12 in the middle of an entry about a contract negotiation. "Called D's school today. Report card is strong. Math teacher says he's the kind of kid who fixes things before anyone notices they're broken." She turned pages. The name appeared again and again across nearly 2 years. D at a science fair. D asking about how blood pressure monitors worked. D staying up late reading the manuals Everett left on the kitchen counter. Then the entries stopped. Not the journal. The journal continued full of business notes and travel schedules. But D was gone. Not mentioned once. Not referenced, not explained, not mourned on paper. It wasn't the absence of memory. It was the shape of someone who had decided not to write something down anymore. The difference was legible in how the handwriting changed in that period, smaller, pressed harder into the page. She closed the journal and sat with it in her lap for a long time. Maya came to the hospital the following afternoon and settled into the chair beside Everett's bed while Darius finished his shift. She had her sketchbook open and was drawing something that looked like a circuit diagram with flowers growing through it. Corinne stopped in the doorway. She had been avoiding this room since the night she'd found Darius here. Now something made her stay. "You don't have to stand in the door," Maya said without looking up. Corinne came in. She sat in the chair on the opposite side of the bed. "He sent books," Maya said, her pencil still moving, "to our apartment, 3 or 4 times a year, always old ones. He'd write notes in the margins." "Who did?" Maya glanced up as if the question was slightly absurd. "Mr. Everett." "You know him." "He came to my birthday when I turned 9. Dad didn't know he was coming. He stood outside for like 20 minutes before he rang the bell." She turned a page. "He taught Dad how to read schematics when Dad was little, so now Dad teaches me. We work on stuff together." Corinne looked at the man in the bed, at the slack, pale stillness of a face she had known her entire life. Her father teaching another man's child how to read schematics, driving across town to an apartment and standing outside for 20 minutes before ringing the bell. "He used to read to me on video calls when I had bad asthma attacks," Maya added. "When I was really scared, he'd just read out loud until I fell asleep. He never made a big deal out of it." Corinne didn't say anything. "Dad says he doesn't know if he forgives him yet," Maya said. "But Dad still came. Every night." She went back to drawing. Corinne sat there a while longer than she had planned. When she finally stood to leave, she looked at the girl one more time. 11 years old sketchbook open completely at ease beside a man in a hospital bed, and understood something she hadn't been able to name until now. Her father had not replaced her. He had quietly loved a second child in the only way a guilty man knows how, in secret, at a distance, through paperbacks with penciled margins. The truth about Noreen Cole's death did not come from Darius or from Everett. It came in pieces from 3 directions, and Corinne had to assemble it herself. The first piece came from Everett during a speech therapy session 4 days after he woke. The hospital had assigned a therapist to help him rebuild connected sentences, and Corinne sat in the corner with a notepad and took down what she could catch. He was not always coherent. He lost threads mid-sentence, and sometimes repeated the same phrase 4 times before moving on. But twice, with clear effort, he pushed through. "She found the error," he said. "Noreen, in the IV pump. The software, it could increase dosage without alarming. She came to me because she trusted me." He stopped. His jaw worked. "The company we were weeks from collapse. If she reported it through official channels..." He stopped again. "I told her I would handle it. I said, wait. I said I would handle it." He looked at Darius. Darius was sitting near the window saying nothing. "I didn't choose right," Everett said. It was the clearest sentence he had produced in the session. "I didn't choose right." He closed his eyes. The therapist quietly ended the session. The second piece came from the technical archive. Following the terms Corinne had set that Darius could only access system documentation with her present, the two of them sat together in the records room on a Tuesday evening, working through installation logs. Corinne had granted him temporary read access to the pilot system's engineering files as part of the joint investigation she had quietly authorized without naming it as such. Darius found it within the hour. A segment of programming logic in the new monitoring system that matched structurally a diagnostic routine from a Hale device manufactured 30 years ago. Not similar. Identical in its architecture, revised just enough to account for updated hardware. He printed it. He laid it on the desk in front of Corinne without commentary. She stared at it for a long time. "Same author," she said. "Same author," he confirmed. The third piece required a drive. Corinne located a retired nurse named Beverly Marsh through the hospital's alumni directory, one of the staff members present at the Atlanta facility the night Noreen Cole died. The official incident report listed the cause as operator error, equipment mishandled during a routine procedure. Beverly Marsh was 71 and lived 40 minutes outside the city. She answered the door in a gardening apron and recognized the Hale name immediately without pleasure. "I've been waiting a long time for someone to ask," she said. She described the night in detail. The fact that Noreen had seemed agitated that week, careful like someone paying close attention to the wrong thing. The man Beverly had seen entering the facility that evening through the side entrance, well-dressed, not a hospital employee, carrying nothing, staying less than an hour. Corinne took out her phone and pulled up a photograph. Beverly looked at it for a long time. Then she nodded. The photograph was of Grant Voss. Corinne drove back to the hospital in silence. She sat in the parking structure for 11 minutes before going in. Grant Voss was 63 years old, her father's cousin by marriage, and his executive vice president for over 2 decades. He had been the one to guide Everett through the company's near bankruptcy, the one who structured the original shareholder agreements, the one who negotiated the vendor contracts that gave him standing access to every major system Hale Medical Technologies had ever deployed, including, as of 8 months ago, the pilot monitoring network at Mercy General. He had been at every major turning point in the company for 30 years, and Corinne had trusted his counsel more than almost anyone's. She found Darius in the equipment room on the 2nd floor and told him everything she had assembled. She said it plainly in order the way she would present to a board. When she finished, Darius didn't respond immediately. He turned away from her. He stood facing the wall of lockers with his hands at his sides. He stayed that way for a long time. She didn't try to fill the silence. When he turned back, his expression was controlled, but something underneath it was not. "He was there," he said, "the night she died." "Yes. And your father knew." "I think he suspected. I think he chose not to know for certain." "That's the same thing." She didn't argue. Working together was not comfortable. It was efficient. They fell into a functional rhythm driven by necessity. Darius identified the hardware vulnerabilities. Corinne cross-referenced them against the system access logs. They communicated in short sentences and did not attempt to resolve the larger questions between them while the immediate problem still existed. What Corinne noticed and did not say was that Darius worked the way someone did when they had spent years solving problems that nobody above them cared about, precisely without waste and without expecting acknowledgement. He didn't explain himself more than once. He didn't ask for permission before acting within his area. What Darius noticed and also did not say was that Corinne had not taken a full meal break in the 3 days since they'd started working together, that she checked her father's room between every task, and that she had quietly rerouted 2 patient files away from the compromised monitoring units at 4 in the morning before anyone else on the floor had noticed the risk. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone. The system errors were not random. The pattern was deliberate, a series of small calibration shifts, each individually defensible as drift, collectively producing false reads that would, over time, generate enough clinical concern to invalidate the pilot. Someone with high-level vendor access had been making incremental changes since the day of installation. The access logs pointed to a credential belonging to Grant Voss, the same standing access he had held since the pilot contract was signed. The same access that had never been flagged because he had always been considered untouchable. "This kills the launch," Corinne said. "The launch was already dead," Darius said. "Someone decided that before we started." "He's trying to tank the stock price, drive it down, then sell to a competitor. And blame the failure on the system itself. On you." Darius paused. "He's done this before. He's just more careful now." The morning the story broke, Corinne was in a board call. An anonymous source had sent documents to 2 financial reporters. Hale, internal records incomplete and selectively arranged, alongside a statement claiming that a hospital maintenance worker was attempting to use a falsified family connection to claim a 15% stake in the company. The documents were real. The narrative around them was not. Everett had in fact placed 15% of his personal shares into a restricted trust for Darius. The paperwork had been drawn up 8 months earlier. What the reporters did not have was the letter of intent included in the trust, which explained the purpose. Not inheritance, but legal standing. Everett had structured it so Darius would have enough shareholder authority to force a public audit if Everett died before he could speak. Darius heard about the story from a nurse who had seen it on her phone. He went to HR before lunch and began the paperwork to formally disclaim the shares. He didn't tell Corinne. Grant had already made sure it didn't matter. The story ran on 2 outlets by noon. By 3, Maya's school had generated enough parent group chatter that her teacher called Darius directly. Maya came home to an apartment where she said nothing, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened one of the books Everett had sent the previous Christmas, A History of Early American Hospitals, its margins full of small, careful, penciled notes. She read her way to calm using a method she had absorbed without realizing it from a man she called Mr. Everett, and her father hadn't fully forgiven. Darius stood in the kitchen doorway and watched his daughter turn pages. He didn't sleep that night. The board called an emergency meeting. The choice they presented to Corinne was not subtle. Issue a formal statement distancing the company from Darius Cole and his claim, or face a motion to remove her as CEO on the grounds of undisclosed conflict of interest. She asked for an hour. She spent 40 minutes of it sitting in her father's room watching the numbers on the monitor. Everett was more stable now, still limited but present. He had begun to track voices. "You spent 30 years building something," she said to him quietly. "And I spent 8 years trying to prove I deserved to run it. I never once asked whether it was worth running." She went to find Darius. He was in the east stairwell, the same one he had used every evening to come to her father's room. She told him what the board had said. He listened without interrupting. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I don't know yet, but I need you to know I understand what I did. And I understand what it is to be told the family isn't yours when someone needs you to disappear." Darius didn't respond to that. "I need a few more hours," she said. She walked back down the hallway and stood in front of the cameras and the assembled reporters and said clearly and on record that Darius Cole was not a legally recognized member of the Hale family. It was the most precise, true statement she had ever made that meant the opposite of what it said. Darius was in the lobby when the words reached him through a phone someone was holding near the entrance. He picked up his bag. He walked to the exit. 30 years ago, he said quietly, not to the room, but Corinne's assistant was nearby and heard it, and later repeated it exactly. "He let me go to save the company. Today she did the same thing." The automatic doors opened. He left. 17 minutes later, every patient monitoring unit on floors 3 through 7 went dark simultaneously. The alarms did not sound because the alarm system had also been disabled. The pharmacy records on 2 floors reverted to a cached version from 6 days prior, predating several updated prescriptions. The security doors in the special care unit locked from the outside. And when the night nurse in room 612 went to check on Everett Hale at the start of her round, his bed was empty. The camera footage showed a figure in a maintenance uniform moving through the east corridor 14 minutes before Everett went missing. The uniform matched Darius's. The face was partially obscured. It was enough. Police found Darius at a gas station 4 blocks away. In the trunk of his car, a bottle of Everett's prescribed medication, a portable storage device containing corrupted monitoring data, and a signed share transfer document bearing Everett's signature. What investigators did not immediately know was that Grant Voss held a duplicate key card for the staff parking structure, a legacy credential from a facilities audit he had overseen 2 years prior, never deactivated. The same audit had given him documented access to vehicle registration records for every hospital employee. He had known exactly which car belonged to Darius, and exactly when Darius would be away from it. Darius was arrested on 3 counts. The charges included abduction of a vulnerable adult. He did not resist. He asked once whether Maya had been notified. Corinne was in the hospital administrator's office when her phone showed the arrest notification. She sat very still for a moment. Then Maya walked in. The girl had come by taxi alone. The front desk had called up because she had given them Corinne's name. She was carrying a worn, stuffed bear with a small zipper compartment in its back. She set it on the desk in front of Corinne. Then she looked at her directly, 11 years old, completely steady, and said, "My dad doesn't want the money. He doesn't want the company. He came here every single night for 3 years because Mr. Everett asked him to, and because my dad is the kind of person who shows up even when he has every reason not to." Corinne didn't speak. "You want to know why he really came back tonight? Someone called him. Someone who knew the building and had his number and told him your father needed help. He came back because that's what he does." Maya's voice didn't waver. "You can test his DNA and read his files and make him prove everything. Or you can open that." She pointed at the bear. Corinne unzipped the compartment. Inside was a small digital recorder, the kind used for voice memos. She pressed play. Everett's voice, steady, recorded sometime in the months before the heart attack had taken his steadiness away. "If something happens to me before I can say this in public, I need it said. The shares I transferred to Darius are not a gift. They are a legal mechanism. He needs standing to force an audit that I have been too afraid to force myself." A pause. Grant Voss altered the sensor software on a Class II medical device in 1994. When Noreen Cole discovered the alteration and refused to be quiet about it, he engineered a workplace incident that killed her. I knew. I did not know fully, but I knew enough that I should have acted. Instead, I protected the company, and I gave Darius to a stranger. Another pause. Everything in Darius's car tonight was placed there. Grant has access to the staff parking structure. He has a duplicate key credential from a facilities audit 2 years ago that was never revoked. He knows I'm recovering, and he is moving before I can finish what I started. He is keeping me somewhere in this building, below ground. Corinne, if you're hearing this, I am sorry for what I built. Build something better." The recording ended. Corinne sat for 3 seconds. Then she picked up her phone. The detention facility was 20 minutes from the hospital. Corinne made the drive in 14. She was through the visitor processing before the duty officer had finished explaining the procedure, and she sat down across from Darius in the consultation room with the recorder on the table between them. She pressed play. He listened to his father's voice without moving. When the recording ended, he looked at the table. "He knew they'd come for me," Darius said. "Yes, and he still didn't warn me. He may not have had the chance. His condition, I know his condition." He wasn't angry when he said it. He was tired in the way of someone who had been tired for a very long time and had simply stopped calling it anything. He needed me there every night. He needed Maya to think of him as family. He needed me to come back when someone called, even after you said what you said on camera. He paused. "Both of you only ever call me family when there's something that needs saving." Corinne didn't argue. "I know," she said. "I'm not here to tell you that's not true." He looked at her. "I'm here to tell you I'm going to release everything. The recorder, the code comparison, Beverly Marsh's statement, the adoption file, to the board, to the press, and to the DA's office. Tonight. Whatever that does to the company, I'll accept. Whatever it does to my father's record, I'll accept." She met his eyes. "I'm asking you one thing. Help me get him out of that building and get the patients on those floors to safety. That's all." Darius was quiet for a long moment. "And after that, you don't owe me anything." He looked at the recorder. Then he stood up. "Let's go," he said. The emergency release took 40 minutes. They were back at Mercy General before midnight. The building was operating on partial power. Grant had triggered a staged failure designed to look like a cascading system error. 3 floors were running on backup. The special care unit was locked. Inside, 8 patients were cut off from active monitoring, and 2 were on mechanical ventilation that would hold for another 90 minutes before the manual overrides required resetting. Darius went to the basement utility corridor without hesitation. He had spent 3 years learning the building's infrastructure the way he learned every system by hand, by failure, by knowing which components mattered and in what order. Main distribution panel is split across 2 junctions. If I restore the east junction first, it'll bring the special care unit back online before the wing alarm resets. Gives the nurses about 4 minutes to get everyone transferred to manual equipment. "What do you need from me?" "Get to the 3rd floor and tell the charge nurse exactly what 4 minutes means. She'll know what to do." They separated at the stairwell. What followed was not dramatic in the way that crises appeared from the outside. It was methodical and fast and silent. Darius moved through the utility corridor with a flashlight and a set of tools he had carried on his belt for 3 years. He isolated the East Junction, bypassed the failed relay, and restored power to the locked unit in 11 minutes. The doors released. The monitors came back. The nurses were already moving. Corinne had found the charge nurse before the lights came on. By the time the unit reopened, the staff had a plan and were executing it. She met Darius at the bottom of the service stairwell. "Research storage," she said. "Sublevel 2, independent climate control. It's the only space below ground that stays off the main security grid." "I know where it is," he said. The room was behind a keypad door marked Archive Authorized Access. The lock had been overridden to require a manual code bypassing the main system. Darius looked at it for 3 seconds, then opened the electrical panel beside the door and rerouted the latch mechanism directly. The door opened. The room was large and cold, lined with server racks and filing cabinets. At the far end, Everett Hale sat in a wheelchair, pale and rigid, his wrists bound to the armrests with plastic cable ties. Across from him, Grant Voss stood with a tablet in one hand and a document folder in the other. He looked at the door, then at Corinne, then at Darius. His expression didn't break. That, more than anything, told Corinne how long he had been preparing for exactly this. "You should have stayed away," he said to Darius. "You were almost clean of this." "Cut him loose," Darius said. Grant set the folder down on the nearest cabinet. "I've spent 30 years managing the consequences of your father's sentimentality. He found a charity case and nearly destroyed everything Everett built. Then he brought you into that house and nearly destroyed it again." He looked at Corinne. "Your father is a good man who makes terrible decisions when he's feeling guilty. I've been the one cleaning up after him, every time." "By killing Noreen Cole," Corinne said. "By protecting 400 jobs and a company that has kept equipment running in 300 hospitals." His voice was level. "You want to prosecute outcomes. I manage them." He held up the tablet. "I have a live feed to the system on floors 3 and 5. The manual overrides your technician just enabled. I can reverse them from here. You give me the signed document and walk away, both of you, or I shut it down again." Corinne looked at the tablet. Then she looked at Darius. He gave her one small nod. She had been recording on her phone since they entered the room. It was connected to the board's emergency channel, a function she had activated during a governance crisis 2 years ago and never deactivated. She had opened it in the stairwell. "You managed 400 jobs," she said clearly for the record. "Tell me more about that." Grant spoke for 4 minutes. He was precise and thorough, and he believed he was negotiating. He explained the software alteration. He explained Noreen Cole. He explained the current system manipulation and the acquisition deal he had arranged with Hale's primary competitor. He explained all of it in the tone of a man who had decided the audience in the room was the only one that mattered. When he reached for the tablet to make good on his threat, it was already too late. The board had been listening for 3 minutes and 40 seconds. The hospital administrator had called the police at minute 2, and the system on floors 3 and 5 was being managed by the charge nurse who had already transitioned every at-risk patient to manual equipment while Corinne kept Grant talking. When Grant realized his composure finally broke, he moved toward the door. Darius stepped directly into his path, not aggressively, just completely. Grant shoved a rack of equipment. The server units hit the floor. A coolant line ruptured along the east wall, and the temperature in the room began to rise. "Get him out," Corinne said. Darius was already cutting the cable ties with his utility knife. He freed Everett's wrists, locked the wheelchair, and pulled it back from the spreading puddle on the floor. "Go," Corinne said. "I need 90 seconds." She went to the wall panel and located the emergency power bypass, a physical switch not networked, not remotely reversible. She engaged it. The ventilators on the floors above stayed on. She was through the door before the first ceiling tile began to smoke. Grant was in the hallway. Officers were coming from the east stairwell. He didn't run. The fire was contained to the sub-level archive room. No patients were harmed. Grant Voss was arrested in the corridor at 12:47 in the morning. By morning, Corinne had submitted a full disclosure package to the board, the state attorney's office, and the hospital's governing body. She resigned as CEO the same afternoon, effective immediately, citing the need for independent oversight. The announcement she made at the resignation was not required. She made it anyway. Grant Voss was indicted on 6 counts, including first-degree murder, medical device tampering, unlawful detention, and securities fraud. Everett Hale provided a full written statement to investigators. He formally acknowledged his failure to report the 1994 device defect and his complicity in Noreen Cole's professional discrediting. He resigned from the board, divested his remaining holdings into a remediation trust, and cooperated without condition. Noreen Cole's name was formally cleared. The hospital held a public ceremony in her honor. The nursing staff attended in full. Corinne spent 8 months out of the industry. She returned as a consultant working exclusively with patient advocacy organizations. Darius declined the personal assets from Everett's estate. He retained the shares not for their value, but for their vote. He used the shareholder standing to push through an independent safety review committee with binding authority over product certification. He was asked to chair the hospital's new equipment evaluation division. He accepted on the condition that the role reported to a clinical board, not a financial one. A year later, Mercy General opened the Noreen Cole Patient Safety Center, a dedicated unit for equipment error detection and whistleblower protection. Everett attended in a wheelchair. His speech had improved enough for short sentences delivered slowly. He sat in the front row and did not try to speak at the podium. Maya presented a sensor alert prototype she and Darius had developed over the previous 6 months. A low-cost device designed to catch calibration drift before it reached the patient. She explained it plainly without notes to an audience of clinicians and administrators and answered 3 questions from engineers twice her age without hesitating. On the table beside the podium, Maya had arranged 3 photographs before the ceremony began. A picture of Noreen Cole in her nursing uniform, printed from an old hospital directory. A family photograph of Corinne at about 8 years old, standing with Everett outside the original Hale offices, taken from a frame Corinne had brought from home that morning without quite knowing why. And between them, the photograph from Darius's album Everett and a 10-year-old boy, squinting against the sun outside a community hospital in Atlanta. Corinne stood beside Darius through the presentation. Not as CEO and maintenance technician, not as acknowledged daughter and hidden son, just as 2 people who had finished something together that their father had not been able to finish alone. After the ceremony, Everett asked them both to come close. He looked at Darius first. "I don't ask you to forget," he said, then at Corinne. "And I don't want you protecting what I built. Build something better." Darius held the old photograph for a long moment. Then he set it back down carefully in its place between the other 2. He stood there with his back to the room for a moment. Then he turned, moved to the back of the wheelchair, and released the brake. "Come on, Dad," he said quietly. "Let's get you back." Corinne fell into step beside them. For the first time, the 3 of them moved through the hospital corridor together, not bound by blood or paperwork or the reputation of a name, but by the specific weight of a truth they had chosen together not to put down. There's something this story keeps coming back to, and it's worth sitting with for a moment. Everett Hale loved 2 children. He just never had the courage to love them both out loud, and that silence cost all 3 of them 30 years. Darius showed up anyway, not because he had forgiven everything, not because it was easy, but because he was the kind of person who understood that some things are worth doing even when you haven't been given a single reason to. And Corinne, who had spent her entire life trying to be enough for a man who never said the words, finally stopped protecting a legacy and started building something worth protecting. That's the thing about family. It isn't always the people who share your name or your blood. Sometimes it's the person who shows up at midnight with a spoon of broth and a worn-out paperback and stays not because they have to, but because somewhere along the way they decided you mattered. If that landed with you, if you found yourself somewhere in this story, consider subscribing. These are the kinds of stories we tell here. Real human weight, no shortcuts. New ones go up regularly, and you won't want to miss what's next.